communication. Oh, and also the fact that you've got an ethical and moral problem there. Does the benefit of the community take precedence over the individual wants or of a particular group? Or is there some way of reconciling the two so that both are happy about the end result? And it's a matter of opinion, quite frankly, as I read through it. So we'll see. We'll hear what everyone else discusses and feels about it.
Okay. Thank you, Evelyn. Marcia, comment?
No, not right there. Not right now. Thank you.
Okay, Riva.
Yeah, I find this very challenging because, as it's mentioned, some of the people want to hang back and take some choice pasture. Choice pasture doesn't happen by magic. It comes by extraordinarily hard work on the people who've been tilling the land. And so I don't see, and I know this has already been mentioned, but there's something so profoundly unethical about taking land where somebody else has been for a long time and it appears to be their land. And there's absolutely no discussion of that in this context.
Yeah, and that's a huge moral and ethical problem, right? Because if I say, okay, we're going to invade Colorado, and we're going to, conquer it and sell the real estate, and then buy vacation homes in Hawaii. Well, on what basis could you possibly do something like that? Well, God tells you to do it. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, right? How can God tell you to take other people's land? But apparently in those days, this was considered fine. Evelyn.
The expression might makes right throughout mankind's history. Whoever did the conquering was the one who wrote the history and felt that they were justified in doing whatever it was that they were doing. So whether it happened 4,000 years ago or is happening today, in the political situation, let's say Russia and Ukraine, if Russia should win, then that's the end of it. Whether they are right or correct doesn't matter. It depends upon what the rest of the world or the rest of society feels about it. So I have difficulty reconciling what is moral with what human behavior has been. And so to me, it's immoral. And yet at the same time, whoever does the conquering says we were in the right and they won. So that's the way it is.
But making it worse or better. So the idea that God would command the Israelites to conquer and kill people is something we have a lot of problems with. But the actual reality was that, based on at least my understanding of the archaeological evidence, the Israelites never did this. This was after the fact. The Israelites were already in Canaan, and their writers thought it would be actually beneficial to make up this story about how they killed all the local inhabitants. So why would you do something like that if you're settled peacefully in the land, or not totally peacefully, but you've been there? Your right to be in the land is because you've been in the land. Why would you invent a story about being conquerors from outside? So you can see that the ethical values of the time were very, very different than today, almost opposite, that it was considered meritorious to have conquered a section of land and killed the local inhabitants, even if it wasn't true. Marcia, you're going to report me, right?
No, I'm thinking in my head about what's going on with the last, 60, 80 years, whatever, in Israel now with the Palestinians who say we were here first and you guys came in and are taking over. It's similar in a way, even though it's such a, how do you validate it? It's very, yeah.
Well, on the way to the airport, I ordered a taxi, and a very nice Arab guy came to the place I was staying, Salim, and he drove me to the train station in Jerusalem, and then I took a train. So I said, "How long have you been a cab driver?" So he said he wouldn't answer the question. He said, "Actually, I'm an accountant." And I said, "Well, why are you working as a cab driver?" He said, "Because the Israelis won't let me have my CPA. I did my degree in accounting in a Palestinian university. It's not accredited. So to get accredited, I have to do the whole thing over." I said, "Can't you do a few extra courses?" He said, "No, I have to do everything over from the beginning." I said, "Can't you work as a business person without actually having a CPA?" He said, "No, all the big corporations want, me to have the actual, licensing." So then he says, this is all because of the Israeli occupation. So I don't normally want to get into political things, but I thought, here he is, I might as well ask him. So I said, "Well, what would be your solution to the problems?" She said, "Oh, there's only one solution." He said, "My family originally came from this village on the other side of Jerusalem." He lives in East Jerusalem. "And we came from West Jerusalem near Ein Kerem." He said, "Maybe you've heard of it. It's where I guess the Hadassah hospital is. So we want to go back there." So I didn't say anything. So then he says, "And all the Jews here have to go back to where they came from. America," I guess he thought of me, "England, France, Algeria, Yemen." And he mentioned a few more. So I said, "Well, okay." And that was his opinion. So, but if you believe that whoever's there first gets the land, then, his people were there first, I guess. So depends how you define first. I could have said to him, "Well, didn't the Jews live in this parts 2,000 years ago?" But I knew what he would say. Pam.
Well, how do we explain the American Indians were here first, but
Exactly.
we sort of took over?
Well, in this logic, then we should all go back to where we came from.
Or give them the land back, see how they do.
Or reparations of some sort.
Yes, reparations. Yes, that's the word I was.
Oh, where you compensate in some other form.
Yes.
Yeah, this taxi driver was not interested in that. I said, "Isn't there any other solution?" He said, "No. No compensation, no territorial compromise." He didn't know what the word compromise in English. Oh, when it came up, I started talking to him in Hebrew, and he said, we talk English. So at first I thought he didn't know Hebrew, but then I realized as we were driving that this was an ideological thing, that he didn't want to speak Hebrew if he didn't have to. So, but he's making himself miserable, because things may not change as quickly as he wants. And he said he has an uncle who moved to Ohio and opened a chain of supermarkets and invited him to come join him and be a manager and join his company. And he says, "No, I'm staying here. I'm waiting to get our land back."
Waiting for the Messiah.
I said, "The Israelis are not going to like this idea." And he says he doesn't care. So there's kind of a ironic thing here that this is, we're talking here about almost 3,000 years ago, and things don't really change. Any other comments, Riva? Sai? Sai?
I think that the people who were authoring the Bible, one of their main jobs is to keep people convinced of the one God and keep them together as a religion. I'm sure that this was not a very tight formal group. There were people constantly dropping away, and perhaps new people were coming in. So one of the reasons I think that they made the Israelis heroes is to give them that cachet of being great people, so that the people who might be interested in the religion would stay with it. The people who were in the religion would stay on with it because they felt it was a strong religious, that whole kind of a thing. But it was a job. I think that it was an ongoing job to convince people to this belief of the one God.
So,
And did it work, Sai?
Pardon me?
Did it work? Did it convince
Well,
people of
apparently it
one?
did. We're here, we're having a meeting today.
Yeah, but many of us here are not necessarily convinced to believe in the kind of God that the author of, or the editors of Bamidbar
Well, but then every time you
believed
read
in.
the rabbis, various rabbis' comments, they're invariably different. They're different by 180 degrees.
so,
Marcia,
so basically, Sai, you're saying to be validated, you have to be a conquering hero, basically. Coming in and being the big shot, look at me, I'm so good and
Want
big and
people on
great.
your side.
Right, and that was a concept of that time, or much earlier times than now, that to be validated, one would have to have some kind of cachet, and this gives them that, I'm look at me, I walked in and took over the world kind of thing, right?
Right on, Marcia.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that you got something going there,
Excuse me, I want to just say something else. I sent an email to Marcia. Last week, Muslims burnt a Torah in Sweden. And there was a little notice in the paper, and I cut it off and sent it on to Marcia. And it bothered me that this could happen, so I pursued it a little further. And the reason it was able to occur was because in Sweden, you can burn books. There's no law against not burning books. So if it's a religious book or otherwise, you can just burn it without any questions. Interesting.
But that was in retaliation for
Yeah,
the Koran being burned.
Yeah, the Koran being burnt, right?
So it was like a tit for tat kind of thing going on, and neither side was right. The Koran shouldn't have been burnt, and neither should the Torah have been, for that matter.
okay, let's start reading. We're on page 86. Who would like to start? Pam is putting on a glass as a sign that you're willing to volunteer.
Yes, I was willing to start.
Okay, page 86.
Are your brother? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Are your brothers to the war while you stay here? Horsha Martot raises significant moral questions concerning the petition of the Reubenites and the Gadites settled in the conquered lands of Jazer and Gilead on the eastern side of the Jordan River. The tribal leaders approached the aging Moses, Elijah the priest, and the other heads of the community during the crucial months preceding the battle for the land of Israel. They explained that the area of Jazer and Gilead is cattle country, and they are ranchers with many cattle. Favor us, they say, by giving us this land. Do not move us across the Jordan.
All
Moses,
right, wait. Now, according to this story, which I do not think is historically accurate, the Israelites are invading Israel from which direction?
West to east, it sounds like.
West to east. How so, Riva?
I'm sorry, I'll have to go back and look at the exact piece, but it says cross the river to the whatever.
Settle on the eastern side.
yeah, eastern side of the Jordan.
So it's east
Yeah.
to
Right.
west.
Right, east to west. So they're already approaching or in what today would be what country?
Syria?
No?
Jordan,
Jordan.
Jordan.
Jordan, thank you.
Jordan.
I heard 3 people say it, so I heard Bernie and I heard 2 women. And so whoever said it knows who they said or who they are. So they're either in Jordan already or they're approaching Jordan from the east or from whatever direction. But then they're going to go west toward Israel. And one group or 2 groups say, we want permission to stay in the conquered territory in the east, what today is Jordan, and take that. So what are 2 problems with this? Or what are potential problems with this?
Isn't there somebody else already in the Jordan?
Yes, but whoever's there is going to be killed or pushed out.
Oh,
That doesn't bother them.
oh,
Maybe my taxi driver Salim's ancestors.
What
Not to the airport.
I'm thinking is that if they came through the Sinai Peninsula towards that area, they were coming from south to north.
Right. Correct.
And so how does coming from the east fit into that?
Well, if they come from the southeast, then they're coming up toward what today would be the Amman area, the Jordanian area. Then they're going to go west toward Israel.
Okay.
There's a map on page 85, just previous page. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you can see on the previous page right there. And what I call Jordan, they call
Ammon,
yeah,
Moab.
either Moab or Ammon. Yeah, so they're gonna go around Moab and then into Ammon and then west into Israel. So what's another problem with this? If you're gonna leave them there, they've now conquered the area, they're gonna settle. Then where are they not gonna be where you need them?
On the Israeli occupied side.
Right, so really they should continue west, help everybody else conquer the rest of the land. Then maybe they could go back to the east, but they don't really want to do that. They want to stay where they are or where they're going to be and not participate in subsequent battles.
So the big problem is they don't want to be part of, as Evelyn was saying, part of the whole community of Israelites. They don't want to participate in the Israelites
Israel.
fulfilling their destiny in this new land.
Correct.
yeah.
And so what do you do about a problem like that? It's what.
Right. You could say, well, we can't get everyone to participate 100%. At least they're in the eastern part. They're part of us, sort of. Let them stay there and we'll go on by ourselves. You could say, no, this is not acceptable. We're not giving you that land. You have to come into the regular land with us and we'll give you what we decide. Or number 3, you can come in with us to invade and then we'll let you go back and take the land that you want.
I think the problem is of their non-participation in the whole in the community's whole. I mean, if you're an American soldier, you don't get to choose whether or not you're going to go into battle. You know, if you're a soldier, which these people were soldiers, they were all soldiers as they made that trek. You know, there wasn't you were part of the Israeli defense, that was Israelite defense when you made that trip. You traveled as a group,
Maybe some of
part of
them,
that group.
maybe some of them were conscientious objectors.
We have the Puritans amongst us.
Riva,
Yeah, I think these guys are cattlemen and they see luscious pastures. That would be a wonderful place to settle. Wow, that place looks good. The ground,
that's
you know, they've
exactly.
got water and they've got beautiful land there and it's already growing, whatever. I think I like that land. I'll take that.
But that doesn't make it right. I mean,
No.
they've gone this far with all these people who've supported them along the way. This is the point where you have to support your community.
Yeah, it's like going to Scottsdale and say, wow, that's a really nice house. I think I'll take that one.
I think Paradise Valley might be better for that sort of house hunting.
I don't know. You can't put grass in your front yard now in Scottsdale, so.
I don't have
continue?
grass.
You were gone.
I don't have
Rabbi,
grass
should
in
I-
my front or backyards here in Sun
None of us
City.
do.
Yeah.
All
Rabbi,
right,
Continue.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Continue. Moses is infuriated by their request. Sensing betrayal, he angrily tells them, are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? Why will you turn the minds of the Israelites from crossing into the land that Adonai has given them? Pausing, he continues by accusing them of the same sort of treason practiced by their ancestors. That is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to survey the land. After going up the valley of Eshcol and surveying the land, they turned the minds of the Israelites from invading the land that Adonai had given them. And now you, breed of sinful men, have replaced your fathers. It is a stinging denunciation, but the Reubenites and the Gadites hold their ground. Responding to Moses' charge, they request only enough time to build sheepfolds for their flocks and towns for their children. Afterwards, they'd be willing to serve in the vanguard of the Israelites' battle for the land and remain until every one of the Israelites is in possession of his portion. They also assure Moses that they will make no claim on any land west of the Jordan River. Moses accepts their promise, warns them against breaking it, and tells them, build towns for your children and your sheepfolds for your flock, but do what you have promised.
okay. So they negotiate. Moses sorts of curses at them. They say, tough luck, but we will agree to serve in the army. We just want to settle here first so that we can set up our farms and leave our families, and then we'll join you. And Moses says, okay, we'll wait, do it quickly, and then we're all going into war. Is this a fair compromise, or did Moses, it sounds a little like Moses had to, he had to give in because he didn't have a choice. Originally it was like, you people are traitors, you're scum of the earth. We should, execute you all. But then his advisor says, you need them and you've got to start talking nicer to them and let's work out a compromise.
Yes.
Marcia.
I think it is fair. What I was saying before is you're not helping your people, but in this case, they would be helping.
So that's what's important.
That's what's important. They do need them. That's a couple of tribes of soldiers that would be in that
Yeah.
fight.
Now, this land on the eastern shore of the Jordan River is not considered part of the land of Israel by most accounts. I'm not an expert, but I don't think that even the most radical it's not true when one of the new Israeli politicians, I think Smotrich, was in Paris. He gave a talk and he showed a map of what he wants Israel to be, and it included much or most or all of Jordan. And the basis for that would be what you see here. That obviously did not go over well diplomatically.
Hmm.
You know, other settlers say, you know, the Palestinians should leave Israel and should settle in Jordan. That Jordan is the Palestinian state. So, but Smotrich went further and saying, no, that's ours too, because of what's written here. The problem is that I'm not sure that this really ever happened. Now, but maybe it doesn't matter, you know. I mean, I don't know. Sai.
It's interesting to think that the Israelis have been in the desert for what, 40 years? Where did they get this equipment, this military equipment to fight a war? You know, that takes at that time spears and bows and arrows and you know, whatever else they used then. Where were they getting this stuff from?
But I've already answered the question. Marcia can tell you what I think about that. You know, you understand too, Sai, right?
I don't
But
think I do.
all right, Marcia, you want to Ariva?
Yeah, from
afraid
my
to
point
say.
of view, this is a really lousy fable.
We had a lot of that. We had a lot of that while you were gone. We were.
Why is it lousy? Why is it a lousy fable?
Because it says we're the chosen people and we should take what we want because God said it's ours.
And that's lousy because it's not convincing?
It's profoundly unethical. It says we're better than other people. We're the chosen people, you know, God's on our side and those people are little or somehow diminished compared to us. It's hideous.
Yeah,
We're not the chosen people?
Okay.
well, that's the problem. I mean, on one hand, we want to believe something about Judaism. On the other hand, a lot of the traditional beliefs are hard to sustain in the face of, on one hand, the archaeological evidence that I've been emphasizing. On the other hand, the moral the justification or lack of justification that Riva is emphasizing. So between the two of them, you could see why Judaism's having trouble. And so a young person may not be, you know, fully aware of these issues, but they sense these weaknesses and they don't want anything to do with Judaism. So as a rabbi, how do I convince people that this is religion is both compelling and true when we have all these difficulties? If you're a Chabadnik, you don't care, you just believe, and you kind of ignore all these problems. But we're dedicated to looking at these problems, and once they're raised, it's hard to explain them away. So Sai and Riva offer two very problematic issues. For Sai, it's how do you, if this is written in the Torah, presumably it should be true, but how is it true? How did they have so much military weaponry? I was going to jokingly, Sai, say that the Israelis have a lot of a large military manufacturing, and that this goes back 3,000 years. But the truth is that it's impossible to explain how the Israelites came out of the desert, out of being slaves, and had all these weapons, presumably. Riva's critique is equally problematic. How do you do some of these things, and how does even God justify them? So we could say Sai is giving a historical critique, Riva is giving a moral critique. Between the two of them, my head is spinning, and I don't know what to say.
I think an argument can be made that there are elements of the Torah that explore ethics and law that tell us a lot about our ancestors, how they were trying to address these issues. But I think this particular section I'm not quite sure how one could justify it at all. But I think
And
there are other
does it-
elements of the Torah that do have value.
And Riva, does it make it better or worse that it may not have been true?
I think either way, it's repugnant.
Okay, Evelyn,
Pam.
Shirley,
Pam,
and,
Pam,
Nan,
Pam.
Pam,
Um,
Pam.
I agree with Riva, but I think it's realistic that we have all this in the Torah that it doesn't, quote unquote, make sense when you put it all together. And I think that's just part of the Torah, that we have these things that are hard to explain.
And while you were gone, we Shirley thought we were keeping a list. I guess we really weren't keeping a list
I was
of things
kidding.
to ask the rabbi when he got back. And there were so many points and stories in there in the last few weeks of Torah study that we had really had trouble accepting and believing,
Yeah.
justifying.
Yes.
So this is the book of Numbers. You could see why, on one hand, Riva is sort of partially suggesting that the quicker we turn to something more ethical and moral, the better. But on the other hand, it's an interesting book, right? I mean, this whole story is something we probably haven't heard of that much. And because it's so problematic, it's interesting, So, but yeah, so the book of Numbers is filled with this sort of stuff. Was there anything in particular you wanted to ask me at this point, Marcia?
Well, Pincus was a big problem. We had that was
Yeah.
we had a with
We
We had a
Pincus.
whole day on Pincus.
And the
And
red
you didn't like what he did.
one.
In the end, you could probably justify what he did, but it was just so hard to accept,
And he was treated as a hero.
Yeah.
Yes, well, you get the impression that the Israelites had different values than we do today.
Yeah.
But we don't know how much of that is Israelite values in general, or how much is just the person or people writing and
Yeah.
editing this text.
Yes.
Yeah.
And remember that you can see throughout the text that a lot of Israelites did not cooperate with what these people wanted. But that may put us in a worse position, that we're now saying we don't agree with the redactors of the Torah, that they are ethically not, people that we sympathize with. And so that further undermines our whole religion. So this is very, very bad, very troubling. Sai and then Riva.
Rabbi, inasmuch as you just got back from Israel, I'm curious as to whether the two main political differences could have the same kind of thinking as we have here. That is, those on the left not believing in so many things, including some of the statements of the Bible, versus the complete belief of those on the right. How did you see it?
Yeah, well, a lot of the people in the the group that's trying to prevent them from taking away the power of the Supreme Court, some of them are left wing and some of them are not left wing at all. They're like middle of the road or even to the right of middle, but they understand that once the Supreme Court loses its ability to stop laws that are not quote unquote reasonable, the right wing has apparently 150 or 160 laws all drafted that they can push through very quickly, and there'd be no one to stop them. And the rumors are some of these laws could even include things to make gay relationships illegal, to make attending at a reform service illegal, things that are really extreme. And, because these groups are extreme and they they're threatening if the Likud doesn't go along with them, they'll pull out of the Likud. So you can have some small parties that could get their way on things that are repugnant. So yeah, certainly in the Second Temple period, which is now about 1,000 years further ahead than where this is supposed to be taking place, right? But we know that this was written many hundreds of years later, so it's actually closer to the period I'm talking about. There were different groups that very much mirror what we see today. I mean, I guess it's natural that societies break up into left wing, right wing, and middle of the road. And the views are not that different. But the people who were redacting the Torah appear to have been the right wing. And, we mostly fall in the middle or to the left. So I don't know. I'm troubled. Riva.
Yeah, I think one of the core issues that comes out clearly here that's been so problematic for a very long time is, what does it mean to be a chosen people? And how does it relate to other communities outside the Jewish communities? And I think that's a real tough one. And I was a freshman in college, and I went to Hillel for the first time and the last time. The entire sermon was on treat Jews better, do all your business with Jews. We're the chosen people. Stick within our group, and much less respect for people who are outside Judaism. I found
This was at which university?
University of Connecticut, UConn,
Oh, really?
Stores.
Yeah, at Stores, Connecticut.
I
I
lived
went
right
to the
near
Hillel one time. I was absolutely outraged by that, as a young adult, and I left for a long time.
Wow.
Wow.
And that was at the Hillel itself. So
Right,
that was a sermon delivered by the Hillel rabbi to the students.
right.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. And but you could see how that attitude might be consistent with certain texts.
I can see that. I can also see why this is a core issue related to Judaism, and it's a tough one.
And you can also see why the Palestinian taxi driver would be resentful.
Sure.
He obviously made some mistakes of his own. He should have known that if he studies accounting at a Palestinian university that's not accredited in Israel, he's not going to be able to get his CPA, right? He should have been a little smarter, but he also probably correctly, especially under this coalition, senses that they don't want him, and they've made rules to keep him out specifically.
Right. I've worked a lot with Native American groups here in the United States, within Arizona. And, you visit areas within the state where the people don't even have running water. And there's a lot of discussion now about making sure they have access to the internet. And I find that all of that painful.
You just drive up to northern Arizona, you can drive through the Indian communities, you can see the conditions they're living in up there. Your taxi driver, he may not have been accepted in a Israeli program. You don't know that either.
It would have been very hard for him to, I'm sure that that was part of it. And as a non-Israeli, there's all sorts of problems. Evelyn.
This country at one time was also equally as restrictive to various groups. My husband was an orthodontist, and it would have been the kids were 50, it must have been about 1960. And he was presenting his board's paper in Los Angeles. And so we went to Los Angeles, and my husband fell in love with the California that was in 1960, not what it is today. And he would have loved to have established a practice. We were living in Connecticut. It turns out that many of the states, particularly California and Florida, were highly restrictive. They would not accept any professional who had not gone to their particular universities. And so if my husband wanted to practice orthodontics in California, he would have had to have redone his entire study and graduated from a California university in order to receive his license. The same was true in Florida, because at that point, those two states were particularly attractive. The weather, the whatever social conditions existed, they were
No
particularly
income tax.
time. Yeah. And so in order to prevent an influx of people from out of state, they insisted that you do it. So needless to say, we stayed in Connecticut, but they were equally as restrictive for physicians at one time. And if you were a physician in the Northeast, you might not have been able to get a license elsewhere. The physicians received universal approval, in a sense, and acceptance much more rapidly than the dentists, but it was really only until recently that it was regional licenses. And so it became very difficult to be fluid in movement from one state to another. So, you know, even in modern times, there are restrictions as such.
My father had the same exact problems, but my mother wanted to move to New Jersey, and New Jersey had the same thing, that you had to take this test, and they made the test so hard that no dentist could ever pass it. And then I guess it was for a certain number of years, and then they changed it. And by that time, my parents were no longer interested in moving to New Jersey.
Yeah.
But if I'd known that, you know, they had the equally, you know, I would have said at least try to go to California instead of New Jersey. That makes more sense. Marcia and Cy, and then we'll go on.
Quickly, we had redlining
Really?
in real estate here. I mean, there was all kinds of restrictions, whether it was by your color or your religion or whatever. I mean, when we moved to Massachusetts, a Jewish apple farmer in Stowe, Massachusetts, told my husband that, you know, it cracked us up. Jews are spotty in the country, is what he said. So there weren't too many Jewish people on the outskirts in Exurbia, Boston, outside of the inner circle. If you started to go out a bit, we belonged to a congregation that were like 15 families or something to start with in our town, you know, and it was really, you were a pioneer of sorts. And so you did shop Viva with the Jewish people, and you did try to hang out because you were trying to encourage each other, you know?
Sure.
So, you know, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I can understand in a different time, in a different place, that things would look very
And that
different.
was in 1966, and you were talking about around that same era. as
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the time period.
right.
Shirley, did you want to say something?
Yeah, back in the early 1960s, I was dating a young man from Israel, and he was a dentist, and he did his dental work after he was out of the service. He worked with the Army for several years as a dentist, and he moved to Detroit, and they would not allow him to become a dentist, to work as a dentist in Michigan or in the United States, because some of the courses that he took were more required in Michigan or in the United States than they were in Israel. So he had to go back to school in Detroit, and he worked as a pharmacist while he went back to school so that he could get a dental license in the United States. That was in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, I, you know, when I was a student in Israel, which is going back 30 years, A lot of Russians were moving to Israel at that time, and as today, and that there was on TV they had an interview with a guy who was sweeping streets, and they said, they interviewed him in Russian. They had subtitles, and they said, "What were you doing in Russia?" He said, "I was a brain surgeon, a neurosurgeon." And so they said, "Well, how do you feel about sweeping streets in Israel?" So he says, I decided to leave Russia because I wanted a better life for my children. And I knew that it would be tough. I'm doing this because it fits my schedule, because I am taking courses to get accredited as a doctor here in Israel. It's going to take another 18 months. But I'll be able, and so in 18 months, I'll get my license as a doctor and I'll be back in business. And hopefully I can be a neurosurgeon again. And I'm learning Hebrew. And then in the evenings, I do this job to make a little bit of money. And he said, it's not easy, but I knew what I was facing and I'm okay with it. And it just came on TV and I watched it and I have no idea what happened to the guy or anything or who he was, but, it kind of shocked me and I remembered it. And I remember my aunt saying, become a dentist. So if you have, in our family, we were in America from 1905, which is relatively long. And she said, if you have to leave a country suddenly, you can go somewhere you don't speak the language and get a job as a dentist because it's not as verbally based and as say lawyer or something. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if China's going to let a Jewish American dentist who doesn't speak a word of Chinese start drilling into their people's teeth. But
not happening.
But it's interesting, the mentality. Okay, let's go back. We're now moving to the rabbinic interpretation of this section. So we're done with the biblical account itself, and we're moving to the what Harvey calls the early rabbis.
So are we at criticizing the request? Is that where we are?
Correct. Any word that starts with the word criticizing is very appropriate for our group.
Okay. Criticizing the request of the Gradites and the Reubenites, the early rabbis comment on their explicit greed and link them to Torah, Goliath, and Balaam, who acted unscrupulously to accumulate their wealth only to lose it. They argue that the petition brought before Moses by the Gadites and the Reubenites is self-serving. It is the work of the people who love their money and are willing to sacrifice the welfare of their people to protect their own narrow interests. In fact, they say the rabbi, they separate themselves from their people because of their concern for possessions.
All right, let's stop there. They're capitalists. America is a capitalist country. There's, nothing wrong in American culture with, trying to make money and trying to watch for your self-interest, right? That's what America is about, right? The streets were paved with gold.
Right.
So he doesn't say who these rabbis were, but they linked them to Korah, who rebelled against Moses, and Goliath, who fought David, and Balaam, who was the non-Jewish prophet who was paid to curse the Israelites, and that they love their money and they want to protect their own financial interests. Isn't that obvious? I mean, I agree with their critique. I mean, that this is true, but is there anything wrong with, here they're entering the land, they're seeing, okay, Israel's going to become a big high-tech hub, and the price of apartments is going to, then if you'd said what the price of apartments was going to go up to, that a little tiny apartment is going to go over $1 million, and a really nice one's going to be like $6 or $8 million, nobody would believe it. But these guys are simply trying to figure out how they're going to make some money. So they're going to be ready for the big high rises in Tel Aviv that they will be in a position to buy one or two. Is that bad? Evelyn?
In this country, we have these huge corporations that are an international, they're involved in an international economy per se. And so they have had dealings, let's say, not so much with, yes, with Russia, but particularly China. They're very much involved with China. And so by giving China the monetary advantage, the economic advantage, in a sense, aren't they doing harm to our own economy and essentially weakening us? And so, I got good news and bad news, as the saying goes. Yes, it's wonderful to have this wealth distributed and to have our own companies be able to do so well economically. And yet at the same time, isn't it a bit insidious that they are in essence strengthening the quote enemy per se, when we know that China is out to outdo us in terms of economy and politically and militarily? So it's things haven't really changed in these thousands of years.
Riva?
I think there's a difference between saying, if you work hard, you'll prosper, as opposed to saying something like it's okay to exploit other people to your advantage. And I think that's the dividing line. It's not that it's harmful to do well by working hard and being successful, but there's a line you cross when you start harming other people to do so.
Okay. Anybody want to respond to Riva? Does everyone agree with Riva? Pam?
No, I agree. It's just some people have trouble finding it, understanding where that line is.
Yeah.
And that's what gets them into problems.
But you can understand that the Gadites and the Reubenites are watching out for their own financial interests. That's not inherently wrong, is it?
No.
It's when you cross that line, though, when you're harming other people to your advantage.
Who determines that line?
I think we all have to determine it for ourselves, but I think we should determine it very carefully.
Well,
here they are on their way. They see some good cattle country. They want to grab it. They ask Moses for permission, but they want it.
Yeah, but they asked Moses for permission. To me, that was critical. They just didn't say, forget
They had to.
in this land. They did ask.
They had to. If they had just taken it without getting permission from Moses, Moses would have started a war against them, right? They had to get this permission.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that they were just trying to be nice. Sai.
Oh, we're back to the basic problem of one man calling all the shots, namely Moses making all the decisions and not giving the people a chance to voice their opinions about anything, and that certainly is not right.
Sai, if you were with the Israelites, you would have been swallowed up by the earth, because that's what these rebels were saying. Some of them said the same thing. Moses, who are you to make all these decisions? Are we not equally part of the chosen people? We're all equally holy. And God said, Moses, let me handle this. And he just had these people poof.
If they could get spears, they could have had voting machines.
I think if you were part of the Israelites, your wife would be telling you, Sai, keep your mouth shut. Don't say another word or we're going to end up poof.
This was Korah. That was the other one that we had problems with, Korah.
Yeah, and there was Nadav and Avihu. There were several rebellions, and they were based on very good thinking, like Sai's thinking. But I can say it, nothing happens to him. So, he's fortunate.
Not anymore.
Bernie, any comment? Okay, Pam, back to you. Keep going.
Okay, let me see, where are we?
In
The parallel between the Gadites and the Reubenites to Balaam, Golith, and Korah, rabbinical interpreters suggest that they all suffered defeat for the same reason. They snatched their wealth by using strength, power, manipulation, and devious means. They are out for themselves, are inconsiderate of others, and will use any means to increase their riches. Their wealth is temporary, say the rabbis. It goes as quickly as it comes, as it is not a gift of God. Because of their greed, they lose it all within 2 centuries when they are exiled by evading troops of Assyria.
Well, it took 2 centuries. That's a long time.
The rest,
It-
keep going.
Well, you want to stop and say, so basically, you want to you do the will of God and God will reward you. If you kind of take too much initiative, then you can end up in trouble. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. The rabbis charge, however, that even further, they point out the Gadites and the Reubenites prove how foolish they were by their priorities. When Moses criticizes them for seeking land on the east side of the Jordan River before they helped conquer the land of Israel, they answer, "We will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children." Their response, claim the rabbis, reveals their priorities. Rather than speaking first about the towns for their children and families, they emphasize building sheepfolds for their flocks. They show greater concern for their cattle than for human beings, more attention to their possessions than to their own flesh and blood. Moses, they conclude, is fully justified in denouncing them.
Keep going.
Jewish historian Josephus Flavius, who
Flavius.
the 1st century, 37 CE to 100 CE, agrees with this harsh rabbinic assessment of the Gadites and the Reubenites. Moses, he writes, understands that they are seeking a strategy for securing their wealth on the east side of the Jordan River, not participating in the Jewish people's quest to their land. For that reason, he is justified, argues Josephus, in labeling them arrogant cowards because they have a mind to live in luxury and ease, while the rest were laboring with great pains to obtain the land that they were desirous to come. Josephus condemns them for pursuing self-interest and neglecting responsibility to the common good of their people.
You can keep going. We'll do
Keep going?
Pinchas Peli as well.
Okay, modern commentator Pinchas Peli agrees that the Gadites and the Reubenites represent a serious separatist threat to the Jewish people. Moses' concerns, Peli writes, was with an ethical implications of the succeeding of the 2 tribes from a war that should be fought by all of Israel. The conquest of Eretz Yisrael was not incumbent only by those people who planned to live on the land. It was, in the eyes of Moses, the culmination of the drama of redemption that should be acted out in full by all the tribes that came out of Egypt. According to Peli, however, Moses also worries that the effect of that step taken from Reuben and Gad might have on the morale of the people. He scolds them for sharp language, calling them a brood of sinful men and linking them to slanderous spies, whose reports were designed to frighten an earlier generation from going up to conquer the land of Israel. Their request to remain on the east side of the Jordan River undermines the unity of the people and threatens to deplete their strength just when it is most required. Moses, says Peli, understands that a divided people will not be victorious over its enemies. Their request is nothing less than treason. For that reason, he severely reprimands them.
All right, what do you think?
I think
Evelyn?
I think he was justified because, again, when you split the group up and one is left behind, there is less force for those who are trying to conquer the land. Militarily speaking, it weakens them and also morally weakens them because you have this splinter group that feels that they're not really part of it. Oh, I'll come in and help after I get settled. Well, when you're waging war, you can't wait for those people to come in whenever they feel like it. And so, in a sense, yes, Moses was justified in reprimanding them and was forced in the end to make a compromise that perhaps he didn't want to, but was forced to in order to keep the group cohesive as such.
Marcia, Bernie,
I agree. I said the same thing before, that you have to support the group as a whole, as a community.
For the greater good, as the saying.
Yes.
Bernie,
But in my view, this whole endeavor is wrong. I mean, what gives them the right to attack the people on the west side of the Jordan?
Is what
Maybe it's a good idea to have people stay behind to protect the flanks.
to stay behind to do what?
to
Protect their
the flank.
flanks, cover their backsides.
Yeah,
There isn't, I don't think it was a flank on the other side of the Jordan. I think it was just a fact that, you know, they just didn't want to participate. Or they were just, they wanted to stay where we said where the money was on the eastern side.
Let's turn to page 89, where there is a contrary view under the box. Pam, do you mind reading in contrast to the explanation of Abravanel and Isaac Arama, who were both critical?
I'd like to pass the to someone else.
Okay. Anyone else?
yeah, I'll read under Abravanel.
In contrast to the explanations of Abravanel under the box on 89 on the left side.
89. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, in contrast to the
Yes.
explanations of Abravanel and Isaac Arama, Rabbi Moshe ben Chaim al-Shek excuses the Gadites and Reubenites' request, arguing that it was motivated by generosity and realism, not by confusion. He points out that God and Reuben seek to convince the tribal leaders that by their choice, everybody will wind up having more land. The reason they stress that they would first build enclosures for their cattle and then provide for their children is to convince Moses that the safety of their children is not their primary concern. The first priority is to benefit the people. Supporting his argument, Al-Shek writes, when Moses realizes that the intention of these tribes has been sound, that they have only erred in their semantics, having been imprecise in the use of language, he instructs Eleazar and Joshua that they should not be harassed for their decision to ultimately reside east of the Jordan River. As with the Abravanel, Al-Shek identifies the problem as one of semantics. However, rather than blaming the Gadites and Reubenites for carelessness and confusion of goals, he dismisses the matter, saying that once Moses understands the true intention of their request, he accepts the fair-mindedness of the Reubenites and Gadites, and that his suspicions had not been based on fact. The differing...
Okay, thank you. Yes, okay, we can stop there. So does this persuade you to look a little more? So what do you guys think about the Gadites and the Reubenites? I mean, Marcia, you're not favorable. You think they're betraying the rest of the people and they're trying to get out of military duty and they're breaking unity and they're just looking for what's going to make money?
Yes.
Yes, and yes.
Shirley, you also don't look too kindly upon these two groups?
I don't think so.
Riva,
I agree with the previous speakers.
Sai?
It's a sad commentary when people have to be killed because of semantics. I mean, you would think that this is a big enough issue that everybody understood and got it straight. But when people don't understand and proceed to get involved, that doesn't make much sense.
Can
Wow.
I
Yeah,
want to amend
Marcia.
I'm amending my yes. I think it's an excuse. The rabbis are making up excuses at this point for Moses is agreeing to allow them to build their sheepfolds and then come and fight. I think it's just a explaining it away, explaining Moses's agreement away.
So explaining Moses' agreement away, meaning that you're saying Moses shouldn't have agreed to this?
No, I don't think he misunderstood, but I think that the whole business about the semantics is a bunch of nonsense.
Oh, okay. That it's not just semantics. These people are selfish,
Right.
selfish capitalist pigs.
Yes. Back to my yes. Okay.
And we should all be more devoted to the unity of the people. So how many people here are members of the Communist Party? I mean, that's like, where the people are, the proletariat is everything and the individual is nothing. That didn't work out so well, though. If
Bernie
taken
had
to-
something to comment.
Bernie.
I think that these guys had the right idea. That rather than leave the sheep and the families vulnerable, they should have been building places to protect them before they went into battle.
What did
So
the
this
rest of the Israelites do with, what had happened to the other families and children and people and animals and all?
Well, they're
That
gonna
was wrong.
presumably go with the warriors westward to fight in the battle. They'll just sort of stay behind.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon the warriors to protect the vulnerable before they go into battle.
Right, and they usually did. One of the exceptions was the people lagging behind were attacked by the Moabites at one point, who killed a bunch of women and children and handicapped people in the rear. And that was why the Moabites were considered to be very offensive. And so when someone wanted to write a book saying that anyone can convert to Judaism, they made Ruth to be a Moabite, because the Moabites were considered the most detestable group because of their behavior in killing innocents. The Moabites should have attacked from the front where the warriors were, and that would have been fine. But they attacked from the rear where the vulnerable were. Comments, Pam, Shirley, Evelyn.
I don't know, your last comment, it seems to me that guerrilla warfare was alive and well even in those times. And if the Moabites felt that by being surreptitious so that they could gain advantage, they did. Whoever turns out to be the winner is the one who has the last say. And so the Moabites felt that they were justified in doing what they did, whether they had a sense of morality, probably not the same one that we did. I still said before, might is right. And if they felt that doing damage to the Israelites was proper in their sense of values, that's what they did. And in order to protect themselves, the Israelites had to rethink their way of doing warfare, per se.
The winners get to write the history.
Yeah.
Yes, Shirley.
That's right. Yeah.
Anybody think that this sounds like what Ben and Jerry's was talking about last week or a couple of weeks ago? Where they were suggesting that America should give back their land to the Indians because we stole it from them, except that they weren't going to give theirs back because they have a business going on it.
Yeah, it was very weird because it was so obviously hypocritical.
Right.
And so you would think that they would have thought, either we have to set the example and give back our land first, or we should keep quiet about the whole thing. But
Right.
but that doesn't mean that they're wrong, right? The idea that, are
No.
you allowed to
Yeah.
seize land from other people by force hundreds of years ago? And is that okay because people at the time didn't think it was wrong? Shamarsha.
I always wondered, I know it happened in Israel, I think on the West Bank, where the Israelites walked out of a town and ceded it to the Palestinians a few years ago, maybe 10, 20 years ago, something like that. But when they do something like that, when you cede land back, what happens to all the construction that's on there? You don't burn the land, you don't burn the ground behind you as you leave, mostly you don't. And you've got all kinds of infrastructure, whether it's sewers or hospitals or roads and whatever, schools. You just walk away and you leave that land, that built up, developed area to whoever you're leaving it to, in that case, it was Palestinians. And I just wondered, you improve that land, why do you give that back to somebody who never worked that land, never tried to do any of the improvements? I just don't know what's right and wrong in that situation.
That's a good question. So what is right and wrong? Comments on what Marcia just said? Evelyn or Bernie?
I think that sometimes you find there's a scorched earth policy, and those who are retreating literally demolish and wipe to the ground everything that they have put in, rather than see it fall into, quote, enemy hand.
But in Israel right now, don't you think the Palestinians are not thinking scorched earth? They're thinking walk away and leave us this built
Yeah,
up.
they'd love every Israeli to leave and leave them a beautiful land that has been developed.
Right.
Israelis. And I think it's rather unrealistic, but hey, when you have a particular mindset, you figure that's what they should do. But
That's what I deserve, kind of thing.
right.
I don't know. I mean, that's what your Arab taxi driver wants. He wants you to everybody to walk away and leave them, whatever he's, all the accounting firms that he could walk into and just start accounting,
Right.
But I tried several times to ask him what kind of compromise would he accept, and each time he said, no, there's no compromise, there's only one solution. And so, it's a very rigid approach.
Which means that when they actually come to do outright battle, whoever wins will be the one who conquers the other. Because again, with no compromise, it means then it's a battle to the death, so to speak. And when they say, no, we will not compromise, well, it's talk. Whether they actually would compromise, it's difficult to say. It depends on the conditions. But when you have, as I say, this rigidness as such, you realize that there is no chance of discussion whatsoever. Don't confuse me with the facts. My mind is made up. This is what it's going to be.
He doesn't see any merit in the fact that the Jews can claim that we were there thousands of years ago. For him, that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the Palestinians were there, in the 1800s. So, it all depends what you're considering to be a president for.
But there weren't there Jews there in the 1800s as well?
Yeah, but they were a minority.
Yeah.
He would say that anyone that was in the country before a certain year could stay there as a persecuted minority. So there were Jews that never left, that were there pretty much continually for 2,000 years. So he might allow them to stay there, but they would be they wouldn't be citizens, and they would be subject to all sorts of limitations.
Well, ghettoized in effect, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think that would be terribly attractive to so that's not we talked about things having to be moral and ethical, but they also have to be practical. You have to have something that both sides are willing to engage with, and make a deal on, so it's not easy. So nobody's really too impressed with these two groups. These are two of the whatever number of tribes, the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad. And their legacy on the east bank of the Jordan River did not last that long. And so that's it for today. We're
So
going to have, yeah.
So they were on the east, they stayed on the east side then? And so they
believe
didn't
so.
stay, what?
I believe so.
So that when
They were there for 200 years.
yes, but when push came to shove, it was the fact that the Israelites on the other side were a unified group. They stayed together. And on the east side, the Reubenites and Gadites were taken over because they weren't part of the whole.
Well, we have to be very careful here to distinguish with what the Bible says and what we historically know. But on the West Bank, on the left side, that didn't last so long either. There were three kings, Saul, who was not terribly successful, and then David and Solomon, that everyone was united under. After Solomon, the kingdom split into two, Judea and Samaria, or Israel. And each one had their kings. And then the Assyrians conquered a few hundred years later the northern kingdom. So Israelites do not have a long record of having good unity.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, you don't say that over here in this reading. You say Harvey Field, the Assyrians took over the Gadites and the Reubenites' land. They don't say, well, also on the other side, they didn't do so hot either.
You can complain to the children or grandchildren of Harvey.
I will.
And tell them that you don't like what he wrote, that he's missing, he's not listing some important.
Yeah, it's a sin of omission.
Yes, well put.
So this raised today some very, very serious ethical and historical issues. And we're going to move somewhere next week. I'm going to have to consult with Steve about what to do. And you all have the PDF for Deuteronomy, correct?
Yeah, what do we have?
Because we're trying to get away from having
Yes.
the office send out all this stuff.
Yeah,
Page 99.
yeah.
Have we gotten that already from Charlotte, page 99?
Yes, it was part of the list that we have. It
Yeah.
says, moving on to the Torah portion of Deuteronomy, it says.
Yeah, which would still put us a week late. But
You want
I'll
to,
try to reach
If
Steve.
you want to quickly combine two of them together, whichever ones you feel.
eliminate one if
or
necessary.
eliminate one, yeah.
But we're not going to send out the photocopies every week. You should have does everybody have the entire book of Deuteronomy, right?
Yeah.
Or the whole PDF? We sent out the whole PDF.
I have numbers.
Yeah, we have it listed through September
Yeah,
27th.
but he's saying that Charlotte's not going to be sending the PDFs as attachments anymore.
Oh,
Because
Oh,
you should have the whole PDF for the whole Deuteronomy.
Or on the
Anyway,
book.
if there's any problems, just email me and I'll try to help.
Most of us have the book, don't
Yeah.
we?
Okay.
I'm not sure. I gotta check, yeah.
So if you don't hear
Oh,
from me, we'll do what's in Deuteronomy next week, which is page 99. If you do hear from me, then we'll try to skip a week ahead. I guess it doesn't matter so much, right?
Well,
Okay,
as
well,
long as
have a great week, and it's nice to be back. And I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm suntanned, but we're going to
Blessing.
conclude with the final blessing, which
Yep.
you can find on your sheets. Are you ready?
Ready.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Adonai
noten haTorah.
Blessed
Blessed is Adonai our God,
God, ruler of
ruler
the
in the
universe,
universe,
who has
who has
given us
given
the
us
teaching of
teaching of
truth,
truth.
implanting within us eternal life.
Blessed
Blessed is
Blessed is
Adonai,
Adonai, giver
giver
of the
of
Torah.
the Torah. Amen.
Man,
Amen.
stay well, stay cool.
everybody. Have a good week.
Yep, say everybody.
Nice to
Everybody,
see
yeah.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
See everybody Friday.